Hey guys, Josh Olfert back with another video, and last week or a couple days ago we put out a video about my brand new apartment tour, and you can check that out on my channel. But in that video I talked about having this discussion, and I was asking you guys, are you curious to hear about this rent versus buy discussion? And a ton of people were like, yes, I want to hear about, why did I choose to rent as opposed to buy? So today we're going to talk all about that. We're going to talk about my experiences with renting and with buying. And lastly, you know what? Last time we were here to show you guys around, we forgot the best part of the entire apartment. So at the end of the video, we're gonna show you that as well, the best thing. So hit like and subscribe, and let's get into it. All right, so if anybody is qualified to talk about houses and what it's like to live in a house, I mean, everybody does, but it's me, because I have lived in 12 different houses over the course of my life. Some of them I've bought, some of them I've rented, and some of them were just houses that I lived in with my parents, but that's not the point. The point is I've lived in 12 different houses. So I lived in this house when I was 1. I moved here when I was 1. I moved here when I was 4. I moved here when I was 13. I moved here when I was 17. Moved here when I was 19. Moved here when I was 20. I moved here when I was 20 and a half. And I moved here when I was 21. I moved here when I was 22. And now I live here at 24. I moved into this place, downtown Winnipeg. And you know what? Trying to think, why is it that we moved around so much? And I think if you actually quickly go back through those videos, you'll see, okay, well, every house, funny enough, kind of got like progressively nicer. And I think the reason we moved so much is my parents kind of like, you could see we kind of lived the American dream, right? We like started in a little house in the suburbs, and then they progressively like got bigger and nicer. And there were actually houses that we lived in that weren't even in that video. But anyways, I've definitely lived in a lot of houses that our parents owned, and I've also lived in houses that I've rented, or I'm renting this place. I've lived in places that my parents rented and that my parents owned. Like I've had the experience of all of those. And the funny thing that comes to mind is that I was talking with my dad one time. This is around when I got started doing rental properties, and he was really excited that I was getting into rentals and actually using real estate to make money as opposed to losing it, because he said something really interesting. He said to me, the biggest destroyer of wealth in his life was probably the fact that he moved so much, was probably the fact that, people highly underestimate what it costs to move. Every time you move, you have to pay realtor commissions and lawyer fees and land transfer taxes. And when you move, you gotta pay shipping fees, and you're gonna need new furniture because the new place has new stuff. So we need to get new furniture, and every single time you move, it costs a lot of money. So all that being said, I do have a bias, right? I wanna put it out there. I do have a bit of a bias against buying a home. And the reason I do is because I've had that experience of seeing it actually be potentially a wealth destroyer. Not just, some people say their house is the best investment they ever make. For me, I don't buy that. I mean, for some people that might be, and good for them, but I don't buy that as your best strategy moving forward by any means. So anyways, guys, all of this to say, why am I choosing to rent right now? And what's the argument for rent versus buy? Well, like let's be completely honest. Let's not like virtue signal and say, oh, it's a better idea. It's more financially lucrative. No, if I think about it straight up, I could afford a way cooler place without a down payment that looks way cooler, that'll be way more impressive to my friends for way less money, right? I don't have to put up a down payment. I don't have to pay that much in utilities and fees, and it's cheap, and I can have a sick place. Like, what more do you want than that, right? That, at my mind's first glance, that's why I chose to rent, if I'm being honest with myself. But in addition to that, convenience, Convenience is huge for me. The fact that, I can go down an elevator and there's a food court. I can walk 5 minutes out my door and be at my office. I don't have a commute anymore. Any place, it's just this unrivaled convenience that I have by renting, because if something breaks, I don't have to fix it. And if there's some sort of issue with an appliance or water starts falling through the ceiling, hey, guess what? It's not on me. It's not some fix that I now surprisingly have to come up with the money for, right? That's huge. And lastly, I love being central. Being central is super nice, right? Not having to commute an hour every single place you go, massive for me. Being central. And if you want to be central, regardless what city you're living in, the odds are going to have a house to buy right in the downtown city center is very low. So those are the three things that come to mind immediately, like convenience, the cost is way lower, and the fact that, you know, it's right downtown. That's awesome. Now, devil's advocate, what's the best reasons for buying a house? There's a lot of reasons you would buy a house, and I own a house, right? That last one I showed you in that video, when we were in, you know, the West End there, I have a rental property that I own, and I lived in there. And there were days when I remember like sitting out on the front lawn, it was a nice summer night, you know, and I had just mowed the lawn and watered the grass, and I thought to myself, like, this is the best. Like, this is my land, this is my property. Like, this is, you almost have that peaceful sense in your mind, like, this is all I need in life, is to just have my own little space, my own little property that I can make my own and take care of and put time and effort into, right? So the pride of ownership, that's what I would call that. The pride of ownership is unmatched when you buy a house. Second of all, you can make it your own, right? You can completely customize a house. If you find that dream place, you can make it your own. You can get all Pinteresty and put stuff in there and spend way too much money on furnishings and decor and all that kind of stuff. The most important or the most beneficial feature of buying a home is forced savings, right? Your mortgage acts as something that you're paying off every single month, right? It's a loan that you're paying off. You are being forced to make that payment. What happens if you don't make your mortgage payment? The creditors come, the lenders hire some, you know, agency to come and start seizing your stuff and locking your doors and putting your house up for sale, because if you default on your mortgage, that's an issue. You're gonna go, you know, it's gonna have massive implications for your credit score. You're also gonna be in a position where you could probably never buy a house again, and you're gonna be homeless. So skipping mortgage payments just doesn't happen. You don't do it unless you're in a horrible situation. That being said, how easy is it for you to pause your investment contributions or your savings, right? Everybody should have some sort of automated savings coming out of their account, or every month be saving some kind of money towards some investment plan. It's really easy. And you know, my 300 clients out there, you know who you are. You know how easy it is to turn those contributions off, or to say, Josh, you know, this month isn't so hot, let's cut the contributions. I hate to hear that, obviously, and as should they, but the whole idea here is, it is really easy to pause your investment contributions and your personal savings that you're doing on your own, because there's no repercussions, right? In the moment, nothing bad's gonna happen. All of the bad things accrue to future you. Whereas when you stop paying your mortgage payment, you get foreclosed, you default, you go bankrupt, all these sorts of things, right? So there is a massive benefit to buying the house, which is that forced savings component. So all of that being said, I mean, let's actually dive into the numbers, right? This argument is useless unless we look at what the numbers say. So let's run through a hypothetical situation. Let's say between you and your spouse, or between you and your partner, or maybe you just on your own, right? Let's say together you have $50,000 right now that you've been thinking of putting into a property, into a house. And you can spend another $3,000 every single month to come up with the mortgage payments and the utilities and the taxes. So we're gonna assume, because if you're saving up for a house, you have a down payment. If you're thinking about this decision, you need to have a down payment to buy the house. So we'll assume you have 50 grand and $3,000 a month, that's the budget. So as you can see here, we have 3 different potential options. We can rent an apartment, and you know, this isn't fake data. This is literally my apartment that I'm renting, this one we're in right now, versus versus a condo and a house that's in my city, exact same specs, same square footage, brand new build, new finishings. We've matched these up so they're apples to apples, right? And there are places that I would actually like to live in. So if we look, the first one is a rental and the next 2 are purchases. And the purchases are a condo for $450,000 and a house for $410,000. So what do we need upfront in cash to buy these? Well, if we want to rent, that's super easy. All we need is a damage deposit, right? We need, you know, I need to put $1,100 up front. If you want to buy a house, you know, people speculate, you know, should we be doing 5% down or 20% down? Let's make it simple. Let's call it 10% down payment. So you're gonna need $45,000 on that first one and $41,000 on that second one, right? At the end of the day, when you rent, you don't have to pay land transfer and lawyer fees and all this stupid stuff, right? So you end up with just $1,100 to spend. That's your upfront cost. But when you're buying, you know, we're looking at $5,000, $6,000 in land transfer taxes, $1,000 in lawyer fees, title insurance, home inspections, all these sorts of things. And what you find is that when you're buying, we know this, there's a huge upfront cost to doing that. But let's move on. What is the monthly cash that we need? What's the budget, right? When I rent this place that I'm in right now, it's $2,400 a month, everything all included, utilities, parking, et cetera, et cetera. If we buy a house, the rent or the mortgage payment is actually quite a bit lower, right? So the mortgage payment is $1,900 and $1,800. But There's all these add-ons. With a condo, you pay condo fees, and this condo in particular has about $360 in condo fees. I am being super conservative here by saying $100 a month in maintenance. I own a house, it is more than $100 in maintenance, but I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt here. So the funny thing here is that these all end up being pretty similar after accounting for utilities and property tax and insurance and all these different things you have to pay when you own a house. All of the payments come up within $150 of each other, which is really interesting. So the monthly amount that you have to pay to either rent versus buy, pretty similar. What in total is the cash that we need up front and monthly? Well, we need, for the rental, it's super low. We need $2,400 a month and $1,100 to start. Whereas the other two, we need $52,000 and $48,000 and about the same amount ongoing, right? And these are real numbers. Like I'm pulling these numbers from the realtor listings. I'm not making these up. So what is our leftover cash? We had $50,000 to start and $3,000 a month. When we rent, here's the argument, guys, or here's one of the main arguments. When we rent, that lets us invest $48,000 or $49,000, right? We can keep that cash and actually use it. In addition to that, we keep $600 a month because we had $3,000 in free cash flow in our budget, and we only spent $2,400 of it renting, right? So now if we look at the other two, not quite the same story. We only have, in one case, we actually have negative money to invest because we went over budget. And in one case, we have only $1,800 to start. And the monthly amounts are smaller as well, right? So this is the argument. If you take the down payment and the monthly savings and invest them in the market, right? Leftover cash invested in stocks. For 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what you see is that if you just take that down payment and you take the monthly savings and you invest it, you actually end up building a pretty solid investment portfolio here, like a really solid one. 20 years out, you have 510,000 in investments. 40 years out, you have 2.4 million, right? Whereas on the other ones, not quite the same. But here's the big devil's advocate. Here's the rebuttal, right? Because the value of the property grows, and if you're renting, you don't get that. That never becomes yours. If you're putting your money into the mortgage and buying the house, you eventually get the house, right? That's an asset that you own. It increases your wealth. So on the rental side, we end up with zero value at the end of the day. Whereas when we buy, I'm assuming the property grows at 2% a year. That's pretty standard. You end up with $960,000 in the house or with the condo, $876 with the house. So what's our total wealth? That would be our investments we've accrued plus the house. That's the scenario, right? Well, when we rent in this scenario at year 40, you might be 65 or 70 by that time, you end up with $2.4 million, right? And in the other scenarios, you actually, when you buy the condo, you end up ahead, which is crazy. In this scenario, you actually end up ahead. When you buy the house, you end up behind. So all of this being said, here is the big issue. The big issue is that when you're looking at renting versus buying a house, there are so many variables. What's the interest rate? Can you invest the money tax-free? Are you okay investing your money in 100% stocks? These are big asks, right? And at any given time, if you're in a city where property prices are appreciating 10% a year, like a Toronto or Vancouver, New York, that's a different case scenario than if you're living in Winnipeg, where I live, where things barely rise in value. There are so many variables. And the reason this debate goes on and no one ever solves it is because you can take any spreadsheet and you can manipulate the data to show you what you want, right? And that's the big argument here at the end of the day, is the spreadsheet is not gonna help you solve the rent versus buy scenario, because you'll always manipulate the data to make it fit what you really wanted in the first place. Have you ever done this where you play eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or you flip a coin to make a decision that you wanted to make? And then, you flip tails and you were wrong, but you decided to go with the first option anyways because that's what you really wanted deep down. That's what data manipulation is. You're allowing your biases to compress the data in a way that it shows you whatever you want it to show you. But anyways, let's just finish off this spreadsheet, right? What I've done at the end is I've shown what are the differences in value by renting versus buying a condo, or renting versus buying the house, and then we use some financial formulas to find out what's the present value of that today. Okay guys, here is the Josh Olfert argument. Here is the whole thing in one simple idea. Financial planners, going online, reading about finance, everybody always compares things, rent versus buy, by what is the terminal value? What is
the amount of money I end up with at the end. Which of these options makes me wealthier at the end, right? In 40 years from now. Here's the problem. Your life isn't lived in 40 years from now. Your life doesn't all happen at the end of year 40 in your financial projection. Your life happens day by day by day, right? And when we rent, what we get is liquidity. What we get is the ability to invest, and every single year we own that house, we have, you know, 112,000 put away, we have 200,000 put away, we have 500,000 put away, we have 1.1 million put away. You go through life being liquid. You go through life having freedom, being able to change your mind. At the end of the day, one of the best definitions I've ever heard for the word liquidity is, what is the cost of changing your mind? If you buy a house and it ends up not being what you need 5 years later, the cost of changing your mind is high. The cost of changing your mind is 4% in realtor fees, thousands of dollars in lawyer fees, all these sorts of things. The flexibility and the liquidity you get through your daily life, in everyday life, by renting and saving the difference, I believe is worth not making as much money in the end. Sincerely, I do believe that. And by the way, you can craft a scenario, like I said, to fit anything. But all that being said, any differences in the wealth you end up with by buying as opposed to renting isn't large enough to convince me not to go through life with this liquidity, to not go through life having the cash to do the things I want to do or invest or take advantage of a business opportunity or whatever it is. Last thing I'm going to mention before we move on. One thing that's really interesting to note, and that kind of gets me going, is the fact that it doesn't matter what scenario we look at, right? If we look at renting, buying the condo, buying the house, in each area, the value of the investments that you put away ends up higher than the value of the home. That's the cool part. All that being said, it comes down to this. I believe that the peace of mind you feel in your life is the highest form of wealth. If peace of mind is something you find by living in a house and making it your own and having that pride of ownership, amazing, do that. If peace of mind is having liquidity, being able to move, having a low cost of changing your mind, if that's what brings you peace, then go that way. And at the end of the day, because you can manipulate the data to make it say whatever you want, this is a qualitative decision. It's a decision you make with how you feel about things versus the numbers. To some degree, that will always override the rent versus buy. And if I could offer any advice based on my personal experience and the projections we run, if I could put it into one heuristic, you want, the simple answer. I think if you're the kind of person who is steady and wants to lock in, make a commitment, live in the same place for a long time, you are ready to not settle down, but you're ready to grow some roots, buying a house is the best thing. If you're somebody who wants to have a life where you're constantly changing, seeing new things, exploring new opportunities, always kind of moving around and having the ability to make a snap decision that changes the trajectory of your life, renting is the better option. And that's why I rented this place. But anyways, guys, that is the ideas behind why I chose to rent versus buy. That's some of the argument points you should be thinking of. But hey, I did promise you something. I promised you I would show you the coolest part of this apartment, and we haven't done that yet. So why don't we get on that now? Why don't we get on that now, idiot? Let's go just do that. So guys, this is the best part of the apartment by far. By far, we come up to the 25th floor, which is the penthouse, I guess more like a shared living space. And there's these unreal sectionals here, so comfy, and this massive TV. The US Open is on. I'm not sure who would have watching the US Open in the middle of a workday. Now let's take you onto the rooftop. It's actually a beautiful day. It's a beautiful fall day here, and this is the view I get on the roof. I love this. I'm so grateful for this. I am right in the middle of downtown. I just get to see all the buildings and have this view, and sometimes I'll just pour a cup of coffee in the morning, come up here and do my work from up here. And yeah, this is the view. Welcome here. Oh, they're cleaning the windows. This is so sweet. I've actually never seen this before. This is crazy. Are they like down there? So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video on rent versus buy. If you have opinions, hey, just as much as you're learning from me, I'm learning from you. So hit me with a comment below, hit subscribe, hit that like button so you can support this channel, and you'll see more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.